guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back again with another video. Today's video features lots of products from Hero Arts. I am using the Pumpkin Bunch, the Halloween Peg Dolls, the Peonies Bunch, the Grateful Pumpkin, and the Little Buddy. Some of these have dies, some of them do not, so it's going to be kind of a mix. And this video is long, it's so super long, and part of the reason that it's long is because I left in all my boo-boos, because I think they're important to share. So here, I started off my card. This is boo-boo number 1. And I started doing it as if I was going to mask my entire scene, like a 1-layer card. And then I quickly realized I have dies for this. I have no intention of doing it this way. So I started doing it, and then I was like, nope, I'm going to change it because I have dies for it. So the ones that I don't have dies for is the Peonies Bunch. And so I wanted to stamp that behind my pumpkin. So that is why I'm using the cover sheet so I could line up how it would work. And then I'm just going to use a little piece of masking tape to cover up the area of the flower I don't want to stamp. I was able to kind of angle my ink pad so that I was only getting this corner, which is what I wanted, but I couldn't avoid that one little peony that I had to mask. So this is boo-boo number 2. So I stamped it down the first time and it just was not as solid as I would have liked it. And the benefit of a stamp positioning tool, such as the Misty, which is what I'm using, is that you can stamp it a second time. What I did not account for is that the paper moved just a smidge when I was picking up the image, and so it double stamped. So I had to do it again. For those of you who have asked over the years why I take the time to outline my images with a pen and I don't just stamp it again with the Misty, that's exactly why. What you just saw is exactly why I don't. Because by the time I'm done coloring it, there is 0% chance that I am going to risk that I double stamp my image and ruin all of my coloring. So here I've created a mask for the peonies. I originally left this part of the flower on because I didn't know if I'd need it. I was able to trim that off. And then this little acorn stem is from the Little Buddy set, which goes with the adorable little squirrel that we're going to use. And so again, I'm using the pumpkin. This time I just used the stamp for placement to make sure I was going to be happy with how it was, because I had no intention of creating a mask for this acorn branch. So I needed to make sure that all of it was going to be covered. By all of it, I mean the bottom portion that just kind of cuts off by the pumpkin. So once I have that stamping done, I'm going to reuse the paper where I stamped my leaves and I didn't need them, to use them to cut out with my dies. So I'm going to stamp my 2 extra leaves and this adorable little squirrel. Lydia calls him Clarence. If you watch Lydia's videos, you know that she has a squirrel that visits her named Clarence that she feeds. And I will probably send this card to her, quite honestly. But Clarence doesn't have a die. But I wanted Clarence to be in front of my pumpkin. So how I solved that is I cut a mask for Clarence. I masked him, and then I'm going to stamp my pumpkin over top of that because I do have a die for the pumpkin. He fits almost perfectly on this pumpkin. There was just a little smidge of his tail that I cut off, but with everything else going on in the card, I don't think it was terribly noticeable, and I was okay with it. If you aren't okay with it, you could always stamp him on your actual card base, like the one where we did the peonies. You could stamp him on there so that his portion of the tail would still be there. And then, the other part would just be popped up on the pumpkin. That would totally work as well. But I wasn't that worried about it. Love this pumpkin bunch. Love, love, love them. I think they're super versatile for a lot of different things, but I wanted to turn mine into jack-o'-lanterns. You may have noticed from the title of this video, where I said sweet or spooky, that was my game plan, is I wanted to do 2 different cards that kind of showed 2 different aspects of Halloween or fall. So here I'm just using my pencil and I just kind of drew in some jack-o'-lantern faces onto each pumpkin. I could have, and I probably should have, but I didn't think about it. When I stamped it, I should have wiped away the ink from the inside lines, but I didn't. So I worked with those lines in order to put my faces in places that would do the most to cover up those lines. So those lines are like the side of a tooth, or those lines are the side of his eye. And then once I was happy with the way that they looked, I outlined it, and I did a lighter line weight. I did a 0.25. Normally I outline everything at a 0.35, but I did a 0.25 on purpose. Heading into my coloring, you saw me erase everything there, because once you put alcohol markers over top of pencil, it's permanent. You can't erase it. So in order to make sure that I don't have any stray lines where I don't want them, I made sure to erase first. Now, there were a couple of lines that I could not work with, and I just had to kind of accept that they were there. I don't think that overall they really detract from the look I was going for, and so I think it was okay. But if that bothers you, if you're like, no, Kelly, that is super noticeable, and I'm looking right at it the entirety of the time I'm looking at your card, then, like I said, just wipe off the ink before you stamp them on just those sections, and you should be fine. This video, because we made 2 full cards, this video is so long that it is maybe just a smidge more sped up than I usually do, just because I was trying to fit everything in there. A lot of times, what gave me the idea for this video was oftentimes people will comment, on other videos I've done, like, I don't really do Halloween, I don't like the spookies, like, we don't celebrate it in my country. That's also another big one. And so I just wanted to kind of show you that, first of all, these pumpkins would be an adorable fall image on their own, but you can turn them into Halloween. The other flip side of it is to do a fall card that includes pumpkins does not, or to do a Halloween card doesn't have to be spooky. It could just be really cute little adorable images. And that was kind of my whole purpose, so that no matter if you like the spookies or you don't like the spookies, like, there's something for you in fall images. So coloring this pumpkin, super dark. You will probably notice it's very dark. And that's because my intention is to put it into a night background. You would obviously, if you were using them differently, you could use a much lighter combination, which you'll see on my sweet card. I do use a lighter orange combination, but for this one, because it was going to be in a night scene, it made sense for them to be a bit darker. And I'm going to show you 2 of the pumpkins, and then they were all colored with the same color combination in the same way. And I colored pumpkins quite a bit on my channel, so if it's something that you're like, slow down, I want to watch, you could certainly just type in pumpkins or Halloween and my name into YouTube, and I assure you something will come up that will show you it a little bit slower. You'll notice that when I'm doing my shading, obviously I shade the segments of, the pumpkin, but also I'm trying to pay attention to, normally I do my light source in the top right-hand corner, but because these are in a night scene, the light source would actually be the center of the pumpkin where the cutouts are. So in this second pumpkin, I'm leaving that top left section lighter because it would have the glow from the pumpkin behind it. I will also then leave in the pumpkin below, the smallest pumpkin, the far right-hand side lighter and the top, because it will have the glow from the 2 pumpkins behind them. I hope that makes sense. But otherwise, pumpkins are super easy to shade, top, bottom, and then on each side of the segments. I did go back after doing my typical lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. They didn't seem dark enough to me, so I did go back in with my darkest color, which in this case I believe is an E09, to just add a little bit of darker shading. In order to give them a little bit more 3-dimensional look, I'm going back in with my lightest orange over the yellow and just giving a shadow to the cut out parts to just make them a little bit more dimensional. I could have even went darker than AYR04, but I didn't. Yeah, so this video is, if you watched yesterday's video, I mentioned that I didn't check the settings on my camera after the craft room redo. This is the second video that I did before realizing that the settings were off. So this one is, how did somebody describe it yesterday? Like a little foggy is how they described it. And I feel like that's accurate. Like it's just a little bit washed out because I had to manually tweak the brightness in my video software. So hopefully now I have stuff on my desk sitting there patiently waiting for me to make it with the correct settings. And hopefully that is as bright as the other ones used to be. Another very helpful follower pointed out the cameras tend to pull a lot of gray. And so that's why it looks so dark, because my glass mat is not as bright white as the paper. So it's pulling some grays. Let's talk about these leaves for a second. So it looks a little crazy because I'm using this YG05 with my YG90 family. And the reason that I'm doing that is, I know it looks wild right now, but hang tight, is because of that glow. So that glow would be cast onto the leaves in front of it, and that's why I'm making those so bright there, and then darker where they would be in shadow. Right now it looks crazy because of the way that I color. I like to go darkest, lightest to darkest. What's happening right now, guys? Oh my gosh, why can I not speak? I like to go lightest to darkest and then darkest to lightest. But I have to leave a large highlight because I'm very heavy-handed. And so that's why you see so much of that green in the beginning. But here, as we're finishing up, you can see that it's really just ends up being a small portion of what is lit up. Talking about the outlining, of course, I outlined all my images because I like that bold black outline. And then I also went over again my own drawing of the jack-o'-lantern faces so that everything would be the same line width and it would look like it was intentionally there. Now we're going to move on to the sweet card. And I didn't know, not that I would be expected to, because I don't know a lot about flowers. I just know that they're pretty. I like them. I like to color them. I like to draw them. But when I was doing my research for the birth flowers, like birth month flowers, to draw them for my glass board. So when we zoom out, if you look in the bottom right, you can see my version of a peony, which is a lot different than theirs. Both still very pretty. But so when I was looking, I discovered that peonies are actually the birth month flower for November, or chrysanthemums. And I'm going to tell you that as somebody who was drawing this, chrysanthemums were not going to happen. Not only can I barely pronounce it, there's a lot going on in a chrysanthemum. So I did try, because I don't like to not be able to do things. I like to master them, and I will come back to the chrysanthemums. But for something that I could just kind of knock out to be able to send in my artwork, it wasn't going to happen. So thank the Lord that peonies was the other option, because those I were pretty well versed in. So I felt comfortable pairing this with a fall image, knowing that it was the birth month flower for November. And so I just did these with some purples, and I did them super quick. Same thing with the acorns. Everything was just like super fast, because I knew how long this video was going to be. When I started this video, I had over 2 hours of footage between all of my stamping, masking, game planning for my jack-o'-lantern faces, trying to finagle everything for the masking of the items and how it would look. Yeah, it was just a lot of footage. So I knew that I wasn't going to be able to necessarily take my time to do the flicking technique, even though I think that's really pretty. I think that this technique of just kind of filling it in with my lightest color and then, adding my shading from there still gives me dimension, and I'm okay with that for this card. There's different techniques of coloring, and the reason that there is because some are faster and some are more like a little more meticulous and a little slower. Here I could not, there's a double negative for you. I had to do the flicking technique for this little guy's tail. Like, I had to. There was no choice. Remember when we talked about last week or so, why are you the way you are? This is just the way I am. I knew his tail would look best with the feathering, with the flicking, and so I was helpless not to do it. I had to do it, and I just followed the curve of his tail that was already drawn there by the illustrator to add my shading. Obviously, as his tail is tucked under his tushy, that's going to be the darkest, and then the other portion of the tail, the end of it that's kind of like curled up in on itself, will also be the darkest. For his body, I just colored him brown, because I'm going to go in and add the shading with my grays. This is going to make him so much more interesting to look at because there's kind of layers of colors there. It's also going to be a little bit more on the realistic side versus just like a little cartoon style squirrel, because in real life, when you're looking at things, not just squirrels but everything, there is kind of a multitude of colors, shades, tones, and a lot of them are more muted. They're not as bright as what I typically color with. So to give him a more realistic look, I knew that it was a smart move to kind of go with the grays. With that being said, it did not stop me from giving him a little pink ear and a little pink cheek, and I'm not sorry because it's adorable. For this pumpkin, I am using that lighter color combination, and all that means is I left out the E09 and I brought in the is it a 17? Is it? Can you hear me sorting through my markers that are still sitting on my desk? It is a 17. It's a Y17. And so that was my lightest color. And then I dropped the E09, which was the darkest color I used for the night pumpkins. And I was happy with this color combination. For those of you who were like, Kelly, you just cleaned your craft room, why are there still markers on your desk? It's because I have put away everything else from this card making session except for the markers, because I have not linked them yet. Usually I do my linking after I do my video because it takes so long to upload my video to YouTube that I do my linking while I'm waiting for that to happen. For the leaves, I did a little bit of color blending, of color mixing to make them make friends. I used basically the same oranges that I used for my pumpkins and then threw in a green. For the leaves on this card, I used the same YG90 family. I just brought in a 93 so that I would have a little bit of a lighter leaf. And for the peonies, you'll see I colored them the same way with the YG90 family, but at the end, instead of going over everything with a YG93, I went over it with the YG06, which just gave it a little bit more brightness and kind of changed the tone so that the two, because they're very clearly separate. The acorn does not grow with a peony. So in order to make sure the tones were not exactly the same, I just glazed over that other one without having to put in a lot of extra work. Outlined all those. Now onto the die cutting. These die cut beautifully. I had no issues and actually was pleasantly surprised with how little white was left around them. Once I had them, this is really sped up. This is really sped up, the ink blending is. Once I was happy with the way that they looked and I knew what my layout was going to be, I went in with the ink blending. And again, on my sweet card, it's going to be a little bit lighter. On my spooky card, it's going to be a little bit darker. But I tried to stick with similar, like the greens are all the same for the grasses. Here I was just checking placement. The greens are all the same for the grasses, except for the spooky card, I added in a bit of pitch black. And for the sweet card, I did a blue sky instead of the darker, like grayish purple sky that you'll see with the spooky card. So yes, I have been very good. I've made 3 cards now, and today I'm hoping for a fourth, but it is already 3 o'clock, so I'm not positive that's going to happen for me, but fingers crossed. Because I miss the making. And I know what you guys are probably thinking is like, Kelly, you're putting out so many videos. What do you mean you miss the making? You're making. And you are correct. I am. But, here, I'm going to go back through. I like to do my ink blending twice. It doesn't matter what inks I'm using. I think that the ink blending twice just gives me a better blend. Also, at some point, I am going to wipe this up with a baby wipe, and you guys are going to see how easily this glass board cleans up from this Distress ink. Super loving it. And it didn't stay wet afterward. Like my media mat would stay wet and I'd have to like fan it. You know how you do when you go to a restaurant and they like very nicely wipe off your table as you're walking up to it, and then you have to fan it with their plastic menus for 500 years. Or maybe I'm the only person who ever went to Denny's. I don't know. But here, look I wiped it up and I had no issues and it didn't really stay wet. I wiped my hand over it. I was good to go, moving right back along. So I have been putting everything away as I go, and that does seem to be working for me. I've also, because I'm very sarcastic, every time I put a card in the finished pile, it's not really, I mean, it is a pile, but it has a tray now, and my sister Michelle is the one who did the sorting of all of my cards. Like I had a lot of them sorted from when I started doing the store. Several of you have asked. I am no longer doing the store. This is the first month where we have not done the store. And the reality is it just was not very lucrative. We never made our money back in what we were paying in rent. And so I probably will sell them online at some point, but I'm just not there yet. Okay, now back to. So most of them were sorted, but I still had quite the pile just in the last couple of months that had kind of stacked up. So my sister Michelle did all my sorting, and she was like, I don't want you to sort them. And I was like, but what do you mean? And she was like, don't sort them. Put them in this tray, and then I will sort them. So she's revoked my sorting privileges. I'm no longer allowed to do it. Apparently I was doing it in a way she didn't like. She was like, it's confusing with the fall and the holiday. You got all this fall stuff in the holiday and it's not, and it's seasonal. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right. Whatever makes you happy. So because I am very sarcastic, I have been taking a video on my phone every time I put a card in the tray and sending it to her. Because that's how I show my appreciation. No, seriously, my sisters are the best, and I do very much appreciate them. So here in this dark sky, I did a light coating of the purple, and then I did my grays out to the black, and now I'm going to go back in with the purple for a heavier layer. I'm not going to lose any of that darker shading. I'm basically just almost like glazing the background like I do with my Copics, but with the purple and still keeping all of the shading in the background. Perfect pearls everywhere. It's been a while since you've seen them. I still love them, and they're perfect for both a sweet card and a spooky card, so I used it on both of them. Just the perfect pearls and the color perfect pearls. Here, I am trying to match, because I can't leave this white die cut. Like, that's blasphemous. I cannot leave it. I do not like it. I feel like I should write Dr. Seuss books. I cannot leave it. I do not like it. But anyway, so I'm just picking out the colors based on what matches the background the best. Sometimes you can't get an exact match. And like, I have this bright green, but in the same token, I've added all this extra shading around the edges. So I found the color that's closest to it, and then I'm going to go back in with a gray for just the part that's in the shaded area and just kind of knock that back. And that works pretty well. So make sure you kind of play around with it. Even if you don't have all the markers, I don't have all the markers either. It's okay. Find something close and then see what you can do to kind of like glaze over it. For the sweet card, I am popping up the die portion. So the pumpkin, the leaves I glued flat, but I tucked them behind my die. So here, I'm not pressing this down. I'm just kind of laying it there so that I can tuck the leaves in behind it. I don't know necessarily that 4 leaves were was necessary to fill the space, but I had 4 of them, so I used 4 of them. And no regrets. I was pretty happy at the end of the day with the way that it all kind of came together. I am going to pop up my pumpkin bunch, my little jack-o'-lanterns, all, I'm going to pop them up all together. I kind of wish that I would have done that before I colored the outline, but I didn't. In hindsight, that's how I would do it. So if you decide to make something similar, I would adhere it first and then color your edges. Yeah, so just the craft room has been working out really well. I've been making a point to clean up everything, make sure everything ends up back in its little sleeves and gets put back in the closet. The only thing yesterday, here, I'm just going to stamp some little bats. This is from that Halloween Peg Dolls set. Just to kind of, set that spooky mood, I'm just going to stamp a couple of different bats. You may want to do this before you adhere anything with foam adhesive. Mine were far enough away and my acrylic block was thick enough that it wasn't an issue. Like I didn't have a problem with getting a good impression, but you may want to do that before you put them down permanently. I chose the Happy Halloween for this, and I think I am gonna send it to Lydia so she can have a little clearance. I was doing so much, and this video is so long already. If I had to do it over again, I probably would have added grass or shading underneath each one of these images. I didn't have the time to do it, or the thought process really, because I was kind of rushing. There's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so many hours in the day that like peanuts at school, and I have time. So if I had to do it over again, I would definitely add some shadows and some grasses. But ultimately, I am happy with the way that they came out. I think that they're a good example of a sweet and a spooky card. For this sentiment, I am going to heat emboss it in white. This time I had my embossing powder at the ready in my little tray cart. It's a cart in my little cart. And so I didn't have to hunt it down like I did yesterday. I am getting more familiar with where my items are. And I know that that's just going to take time, because I'm not the one who put every single thing away. So it's just going to take time for me to be able to find all my things. And like I said yesterday, as I'm finding the things that I reach for all of the time, I am then just putting them in the cart so that they're always accessible. For the sentiment here, I wanted it to be flush on top of my pumpkin, so I did have to pop up just that one corner to make it even, and then I will glue, like just liquid adhesive glue, the rest of it. This kind of grounds the image, even though it's not any sort of shading or shadow. It is a darker area underneath the pumpkins, and so it gives that a little bit of ground. The other one, meh. It probably needs some ground. The shimmers, always the shimmers. I added the shimmers to the inside of my jack-o'-lanterns cutouts. On my sweet card, I added the shimmers everywhere to the flower and to the pumpkin. I am going to add some white highlights with my gel pen. This is totally optional. I added some little dots to my acorns. I added some little swooshes and dots to my pumpkin on each of the cards, just as a little added something, a little something more whimsical. And then that's it. That's both cards. So please let me know which one you like better, the sweet or the spooky. I would be very interested to know. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I know it was a long one today. Thank you for sticking with it, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.